Let's continue with the 6th chapter from your economics book of grade 12, and the name of the chapter is market mechanism. And today we are going to start from effects of changes or shifts in demand and supply on the equilibrium price. So in practical, we will find that the demand and supply continuing conditions keep on changing, resulting to shift in demand and supply curve. So let us first consider the effect of changes or shifts in demand on equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity. So let us first consider that the supply is going to remain constant. The shift of demand curves, that is a change in demand, will result to change in equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity. Okay, the effect of shift in demand curve on the equilibrium price and quantity. So let us first consider that the equilibrium is E0, equilibrium point is E0, and the demand is D0, and the supply curve where they're meeting is E0. So that is the equilibrium, and the price is OP0. Okay, so OP0 is an initial equilibrium price, and OQ is the initial, we can find that the initial equilibrium quantity. Now, as a result of increase in demand, the demand curve shifts rightward from D0 to D1 at the initial price OP0. Price is OP0, but the demand is shifting. That means they're talking about the dotted line. Okay, talking about the dotted line. Now quantity demanded now will be OQ3, but the quantity supplied will remain at OQ0. In other words, this will tend to excess demand, right? So we can find the dotted line they're talking about is the excess demand to extend from Q0 to Q3. This would exert a upward pressure on the prices as explained above. So the price would continue to rise until it reaches OP0, where demand and supply will be equal to each other once again, intersecting at D1, and SS will give us the new equilibrium E1. So in other words, we can say increase in the demand of a commodity, that is rightward shift in the demand curve, causes an increase in both equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity bought and sold. On the other hand, we can say in the event of a fall in the demand for a commodity, that is a leftward shift of a demand curve, both the equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity bought and sold will fall. Next, we are having effects on the changes or shifts in the supply of the equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity. So now we are going to say that the demand is going to remain constant. Demand curve is going to remain constant, and the supply curve shifts because of change in the supply caused by factors other than the own price. So the own price is remaining constant and the other factors are changing. Now suppose the supply increases, say due to improvement in technologies of production. Okay, as increase in supply of the commodity shifts the supply curve right from S0 to S1. It got shifted from S0 to S1. This shift indicates that a large quantity is supplied at each possible price. So already now the price was OP0. Already the price was OP0 when it was supplying to S curve. Now it is giving supply. It is the dotted line they're talking about, supplying more. Okay, this creates a situation of excess supply. We have already explained that excess supply would result in the fall in price. In this way, a new equilibrium would emerge at E1. Okay, corresponding to the intersecting of demand curve and supply curve S1, where OP1 is a new equilibrium price of OQ1 is a new equilibrium quantity demanded and supplied. In other words, we can say increase in the supply of a commodity, or that is the rightward shift of the supply curve, causes a decrease in the equilibrium price and increase in the quantity bought and sold. So if you go for the leftward, we'll get the same explanation once again, that a decrease in the supply will result to a leftward shift of the supply curve. As a result of this, equilibrium price will rise and equilibrium quantity will fall. Okay, so what will happen if you find that both the changes, effects of simultaneous change or a change of both demand and supply is at the same time? We all know that if there is excess demand, then there is rise in price, and if there is excess supply, there is fall in price, right? So let us consider one case after the other. So let us first assume that when equilibrium price remains the same in the first diagram, figure 4, okay, where we are saying that the price remains the same and the demand and the supply changes in the same ratio. The proportion of the change in the demand and the supply is in the same ratio. We will find that the price remains unchanged, whereas the demand shifts and the supply shifts. Here we are considering that demand is increasing from D to D1 and supply is increasing from S to S1. We are getting the equilibrium on the same price, right? Where the demand and the supply curve is meeting, we are getting E, and the same where as they are increasing the demand and the supply, we are getting E1, right? We are getting E1. So we can see that the quantity is changing, right? The equilibrium quantity have increased. Next, if you consider just the opposite, if there is decrease in demand and decrease in supply, we just need to consider it in the round way. Okay, so from D1 the demand is shifting to D, and from S1 this is shifting to S. Then also if the price remains unchanged, the equilibrium is changing, and we are finding the quantity is also decreasing, right? So we can think in a vice versa way also. When equilibrium price rises, what will happen when equilibrium price rises? So change in demand that is greater than the change in supply. So suppose if the demand is increasing, it is increasing more than the supply have increased. Okay, so what will happen? We will find that there is a change in price also. Okay, so when increase in demand is more than increase in supply, price will rise along with the increase in the equilibrium quantity. Okay, what will happen if you find the price when equilibrium price falls? When the relative increases in demand in smaller. Okay, when we will find that the change in demand is, or the increase in demand is less than the increase in supply, we will find that increase in supply is more than the increase in demand. Price tends to fall, but the equilibrium quantity will increase. So we are finding that the price is decreasing, but the quantity from Q, it is shifting to Q1. Okay, so all these are, so simultaneously we can show the effect of supplies. If they are decreasing, what is going to be the equilibrium of the price and the quantity? We just have to consider here as E1 as the initial stage, and E will be the changed one. Then only we'll be able to determine if there is decrease, what kind of diagram we are going to get. These three diagrams are representing if there is increase. Okay, from E it is going to E1. All the figures are shifting from E to E1 in your book. If you just take it vice versa in the opposite way, like E1 is the initial one and shifting to E, then we'll get the decrease. Okay, decrease in demand and supply, what is going to happen. Okay, so there are some special cases also, some special cases in equilibrium where they will show us that the supply curve is, or demand curve is going to be perfectly elastic and perfectly inelastic. So the first figure you can see here drawn is about the price. Price remains unchanged. Here it is saying us about the elastic, perfectly elastic, and the second diagram here denotes us about the demand, where we are getting the inelastic demand curve. So perfectly elastic and perfectly inelastic demand curve. When the demand curve is perfectly elastic, that is demand curve is parallel to x-axis, the first one, parallel to x-axis, a change in supply, increase or decrease result in the same of the equilibrium quantity, but the price remains the same, right? So we can find that the price remains the same if that is perfectly elastic in nature. Okay, however, when the demand curve is perfectly inelastic, the second diagram, inelastic, that is demand curve is parallel to y-axis, a change in supply brings about a change in price only, but the equilibrium quantity remains the same. Okay, that is OM is the illustration. Next, perfectly elastic and perfectly inelastic supply curve. Okay, they are talking about supply curve. When supply curve is perfectly elastic, okay, that is supply curve is parallel to x-axis, the first one, and a change in demand results in a change in equilibrium quantity only, but the price remains the same. Again, in figure 2, supply curve is perfectly inelastic and change in demand, increase or decrease, brings about a change in equilibrium price, but the equilibrium quantity remains the same, that is OM. Next they are telling us about the applications of tools of demand and supply to control the price. Okay, we have been so far concerned with the free markets, but there is no intervention or interference of the government. Okay, government plays an important role in the modern economic system. Among other things, the government sometimes intervenes in the function of the market as to influence the price at which some product is bought and sold in the market. At times, the government fixes the price by law rather than allowing it to be determined by the free market forms of demand and supply. Okay, we explain here two cases is of price fixation or control by the government and use the tools of demand and supply to discuss the implications of such a price fixation. In this, there are two situations. One is maximum price legislation, and or you can say price ceiling. Ceiling means at the top we are having, right? That is a ceiling. And the minimum price legislation or the floor price. Okay, so let us first understand what is price ceiling. Many a time the government fixes the maximum price in order to freeze the price of a particular commodity. This maximum permissible price is known as price ceiling. Price ceiling is a maximum legal price which the suppliers can charge for a particular good or service. Price ceiling makes it illegal for the sellers to charge more than the stipulated price. In India, price ceiling is generally imposed on certain essential products like wheat, rice, kerosene, oil, sugar, etc. So what is the effect of price on quantity? If the price ceiling is set above the equilibrium price, okay, if it is above the equilibrium price, so where is the equilibrium here? We are finding the equilibrium where the demand and the supply curve is intersecting each other at E. So if the government is fixing the price ceiling at P1, okay, they're fixing it at OP1, it will have no effect on the price and the quantity. Okay, people will continue to buy and sell at OQ0, right? At OQ0. So because whatever might be the price ceiling, then also we will find that the equilibrium point is lying somewhere below that, so it will not have any effect. Okay, quantity of the commodity at the exerting price. To be meaningful, the price ceiling must be below the equilibrium price. So where is the equilibrium price? At OP0. So the government fixes price which is less than equilibrium price, that is OP2. It will result to a situation of excess demand, right? If the government fixes the price ceiling to OP2, there will be excess demand. You can find that is already marked as excess demand, that is KL is the excess demand, and we are finding that Q1 to Q2 is the excess demand. So the quantity actually bought and sold at OP2 price will be OQ1. So no matter if the price selling is done at OP2, automatically the supply will be OQ1. Okay, there might be more demand, but the supply will not increase in the market. But if the government fixes its price to OP1, then we will find that there is excess supply and the demand is less, right? So the government usually, if fixes to make it meaningful, have to make it OP2. Okay, but this will lead to excess demand and the supply will decrease. Allocation and availability of supply. Next point. Allocation and availability of price. Since price is not allowed to rise so as to allocate the available supply among the buyers, some other method of allocation will be found. So what are the method that time the government is going to opt for, because the supply is automatically not going to increase in this kind of fixing the price. If the government is fixing at OP2, so how they are going to meet? First come first serve. Okay, in this system, sellers will sell the limited quantity available with them to the buyers who are first to arrive. Next, allocation and by sellers preferences. In this method, the shopkeeper will decide who will get the scarce products. For instance, they may sell the products to the regular customers only. Rationing. This is a most often adopted method. It is that rationing by the government. Rationing is the system of distribution of the specified quantity of product at price fixed by the government. Emergence of black marketing. Price ceiling and rationing benefit of poor consumers because they will be able to get specific quantity of the product which is the short supply at the fixed price by the government, but at the same time price ceiling is likely to give rise to black market. Black market is a market in which goods are sold illegally at prices higher than the legally fixed prices by the government. So if there is now next subtopic is a minimum price legislation, and or you can say the floor price. Sometimes government may legally fix a minimum price at which the sellers may sell a particular good or service. Such price is known as floor price or minimum support price. Okay, floor price benefits the supplier of a good or service. Okay, in India the government fixes minimum price of agricultural products like wheat, rice, etc., and minimum wages of the labor. If the government fixes minimum price of OP1 at OP1, let us see now here they are saying as if the government fixes OP1 as the at the initially they are saying if they fixes at OP1 and which is lower than the equilibrium. Where is the equilibrium? The equilibrium is OP0. It will have no effect on the market, right? If they are fixing below the equilibrium, it is not going to affect the market. Why it is not going to affect the market? Because when they are getting that OP1, fixing at OP1, we will find the supply is less, whereas the demand have increased. And we know whenever there is increase in demand and the supply is less of the commodity, the price automatically rises up. And the price will rise up and automatically will meet at E, that is the equilibrium at OP0, right? So again, to be meaningful, the floor price will be above the equilibrium price, that is OP2. And suppose if the government fixes at OP2, what is going to happen? The equilibrium again is at OP0 and the government is fixing at OP2. What will happen? The demand is less and the supply is more. So there will be excess supply, and as we know, if there is excess supply, automatically the price will be downward sloping once again. So what are the effects of the minimum price? The fixing of the minimum price causes a surplus of the commodity because they won't be sold out in the market. So there will be excess supply of the product. So there will be surplus of the commodity present in the market. In order to maintain the minimum price, government generally purchases the surplus stock of the product which remains unsold at the minimum price support. So as the producers are not being able to sell it, the government is going to maintain, in order to maintain it, will have to purchase these food grains. Okay, the government builds a buffer stock of food grains in India by procuring surplus food grains from the farmers at a minimum price support, and later on this is again, you can say, supplied or given back to the people in the form of rationing. Hopefully you understood. Thank you.